Hello my wonderful viewers, and welcome to another episode of Betty Adams Overanalyzes. Today we're going to take a look at Kaiju number 8 and something interesting I noticed about the artwork on the first page of chapter 63. Now, there will be some spoilers for chapter 62 and 63, so if you don't want any of those, you should click away now. Check out the links below the video for a copy of my book, Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data. Short Stories of Human Absurdity. Alright, what am I talking about here? Well, imagine, if you will, a small town library in the early aughts. Manga, as a major thing, has not taken over to the point where it has its own section in the young adult part of the library. It's still tucked away in the 800 section in non-fiction with the Calvin and Hobbes and Garfield books and the Dewey Decimal System. Take a deep breath of that small town library smell. The low, tough carpets in some mild variation of gray, stacks and stacks of bookshelves, the quiet murmurs and rustlings of a small library, the clicking of the keyboards, and one tiny manga reader sitting on the floor plowing through Record of the Lotus War, Chronicles of the Heroic Knight. That was probably not, I wouldn't call it one of the first manga I read, but it was one of the first mangas whose story and art were good enough to stick with me. And it kind of defined my manga experience of the high fantasy genre. But we are talking about Kaiju number 8 here. So, one of the very first things that attracted me to Kaiju number 8 was the crispness of the artwork. Kaiju number 8 has a artwork that is distinctly science fiction Shonen Jump, but also distinctly its own. The primary defining feature being that the line work is crisp. Everything is well defined. But on this first page of chapter 36, this first panel, the mangaka has sort of literally blurred those lines. The art style is an almost impressionistic use of shading and shadows and less illustrated crisply defined lines. For instance, one of the major differences is that usually there's a clear difference between the color of the uniform, whatever the person is wearing, and the skin tone. And the skin is basically white, the same color as the whites of the eyes and the teeth. That's just one of the common limitations of Shonen Jump sci-fi manga. And in most of the Kaiju number 8, this holds true. But on this page, the skin is dark, nearly as dark as sections of the black uniform. Or rather, the mental image of the black uniform, because let's not forget, on the opening pages of chapter 63, we are in Reno's mental scape. Jumping back to chapter 62, Reno, his self, something inside of him, thoughts that he could not control but were a part of him, had been taking over, and had trapped his consciousness in this mental state in much the same way that Kafka had been trapped by the little kaiju while battling General Director Shinomiya. And what the thing is, when I first saw this image on chapter 63, not so much when I was reading chapter 62, but when I saw that first image on chapter 63, my first thought was tragic dark elf. And it took me a while to hunt down that thoughts. And my mental efforts finally led me back to that small town, cowtown library in the early aughts and getting my first experience of high fantasy manga and Record of the Lotus War. Specifically, this image reminded me of the dark elf Jiba. Now, if you remember, if any of you have ever read Record of the Lotus War, Jiba was an elf, a dark elf, who was born as twins, and the Dark Wizard saved him when he was an infant at the pleadings of his mother by trapping his sister's soul inside of him, which drove Jiba insane. Now, I wondered why this image brought me such a strong connotation, and then I realized that one of my main theories for Reno is that he is essentially a sleeper agent for Kaiju number 9, that his Kaiju number 9's goal was to basically alter a human to be a compatible user for Kaiju number 6. And I thought of various ways he could do this, mostly being circling around the fact that Kaiju number 9 is a fungus-type kaiju and could have implanted spores in Reno's body at any age that would have affected Reno's behavior. Just like in real life, the fungus spores cause the ants to go places that are dangerous and to face dangers and to do things that will allow the fungus to reproduce. I'm thinking that maybe Kaiju number 9 planted spores in various humans that would cause them to have a greater chance of being close to Kaiju number 6, where now and then Kaiju number 9 has a compatible user so that he can take over that power. But anyway, if that theory is true, then it could be the element of Reno, that the thing that's part of him that's driving him forward but is trapping him as if it were an outside presence, because remember, the imagery here is of Reno being trapped in his mental scape the same way Kafka was, by having that having that parasite inside of him. So this could just be a much smaller fungal spore type parasite in Reno. The artistic mirroring would be there, but then we, and again, this goes back to the Dark Elf Jiba having his sister's soul trapped inside of him as a sort of demonic entity. So, those are my thoughts on this art. I have no idea if Matsumoto has ever read Record of the Lotus War, or if that was affecting Matsumoto at all when he drew these panels, but that was the connection that my brain drew. Then, of course, Reno wakes up, breaks out of his mental cage, and finds himself being manhandled by Aiharu. One thing that I did find interesting, all through chapter 62, when we see the darkness overtaking Reno's body in the mental scape, we can't see, or it's very hard to see, his earpiece, his connection to the outside world, because even though he is hearing certain things that the other officers are saying, the earpiece is shaded the same as his skin. It's all dark. But as soon as Aiharu breaks through the mental fog and catches Reno's attention, the earpiece is suddenly a distinct color again, the same color as Reno's eyes. And it remains that way, that bright white color, for the rest of the chapter. So what do you think, my wonderful viewers? Did you see any connection between the high fantasy shonen art style, and do you think there was a change from the classic sci-fi shonen art style to the high fantasy shonen art style when Reno entered the mental scape? Tell me what you think in the comments below. Hit that like and subscribe button, and peace out, my wonderful viewers. Humans are weird. We took a vote, and humans are weird. I have the data. 2 books in a series of human absurdity. Go check out these short story collections. What will our little green friends think of us when we finally do make it to space? Find out the answer in 2 books of human absurdity. Humans are weird, we took a vote, and Humans are weird, I have the data. Available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, and Google Play.